Hey, welcome to the show, everybody. My name is Mike. This is the Leadership Toolkit, as you know, your definitive leadership growth podcast. I have amazing people on the show every week, and we have discussions regarding leadership, management, entrepreneurship, mindset, successes. We sometimes talk about failures, hitting walls, and not just hitting walls, but hopefully breaking through those walls so that you have the opportunity to learn from these awesome people. I talk to people from all different verticals of business. Today, I have got an absolutely phenomenal guest. Gary Chupik is an internationally recognized top mental performance coach. He coaches on leadership. He coaches athletes. He's involved in business. He's member of the Association of Applied Sports Psychology, certified professional leadership coach. He works with players, coaches, business execs, people like the Houston Texans, Washington Huskies, Idaho Vandals, Stanford University, and more. I am excited to introduce you to Gary today. Gary, thank you so much for coming on the show and joining me on the Leadership Toolkit.
Yeah, what a pleasure to be here. Thank you. Love your show.
Absolutely. If you would, just take a couple of minutes, and if you would share a little bit about yourself. What's your background? Where did all of this start? How did you get to where you are now? And you can do, the 30 years of leadership in 3 minutes, right? No problem.
Yeah. I grew up in Saskatchewan, Canada, got married to a gal from Seattle, Washington. So I've lived in Seattle for about 35 years. And it's been a lot of fun. I am a reluctant leader, kind of always placed in leadership positions ever since I was a little child. And I call myself a reluctant leader. I never really have pursued or desired to be in leadership. I say that leadership kind of found me. And I think when we concentrate on character and integrity, I think we have a way of rising to the top in whatever industry that we're in. So I was an ordained minister for about 30 years. It's kind of where I cut my teeth on leadership. It feels like the ministry was a classroom that I feel like I was in for quite a while. And I think that often we get put in these classrooms and we just I think our desire is to pass the class. So I did that for about 30 years. And then I ended up having a burnout in 2019 and kind of figured, what am I going to do with my life? And I can go buy a Camaro, or I can sort of rethink my life a little bit. And so I hit the hard reset button in my life. And then kind of, it was interesting. I think I just needed a different language other than therapy and counseling and spirituality and sports psych. Sort of getting reacquainted with my former self was such a joy. And it was a language that I understood. And so that operating system was really helpful for me in conquering burnout. And then I ended up meeting Trevor Moawad, who was Russell Wilson's quarterback of the Seattle Seahawks at the time, his mental performance coach. And he kind of took me under his wing for a year and did some mentoring with me. And so that was really cool. He ended up hiring me for a bit. And I've ended up being on my own, doing my own business and kind of promoting leadership, kind of the cross-section of leadership and mental performance, which I think is super unique, but it's really a lot of fun, and it's put me in touch with a lot of people. So right now, I probably work with 50% athletes and 50% with businesses.
That's awesome. And we were talking before we went live here about, how much sports analogies like bridge the gap into business and so forth, and mindset and growth. And hey, how does this apply to this other business or other place? One of the things I want to get into, and I want to ask you early. So 2019, that is a heck of a time to say, hey, I'm going to go do this right before everything broke down in 2020. How did you navigate through? And I'm making an assumption here. I'll be clear with that. Like, that had to be sort of a difficult time to get things started and turned around to head off on your own.
Yeah. I don't have great timing when it comes to these things, at least on the surface. But I think the benefit of starting right before COVID, of course, we didn't know COVID was going to happen. But
sure,
the benefit of that is it just gave me a little bit of a runway to sort of formulate my system and my process. In fact, Trevor Moawad, he said, hey, Gary, if you were to work with a professional team or professional athlete, what would be your process? What kind of a process or system would you take them through? So it gave me time to develop that. And so for that, I'm actually quite thankful. So, in hindsight, it was probably really beneficial for me to wrap my head around the sports psych industry. And I think it gave me time to develop and think about, who I am. And I think whenever you do something for quite a long time, it becomes part of your identity. And so I had sort of this identity as a minister for 30 plus years, as you could well imagine.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, I did, local stuff, regional stuff, national stuff in that arena. But when you go out on your own and you're for profit and you can make a living, and it's kind of do or die. Like you eat what you hunt, and I think that was just a really great formulaic time for me. And so, yeah, I don't look at it, even though on the surface I might be kind of like, well, that was really, not ideal. Yeah, in some ways, but I think in other ways it was probably pretty helpful.
Sure. No, and I appreciate you sharing that. A couple of things before I get too far into the show, because usually I'll get like 20 minutes and then I'm like, oh yeah, I got to, for people that are tuned in, whether you're watching live or if you're maybe listening on the podcast later, Gary's got a couple of places you can connect, and it's linkedin.com/Gary Chupik, GaryChupik. Also, certainly his websites. You can go to elitemindsetnation.com. That's spelled just how it sounds: ELITEMINDSETNATION, elitemindsetnation.com. Also, you mentioned One Day Elevate. One Day Elevate is taking the best of sports mental performance into business, which we were talking about some those things that bridge the gap. So one of the things I would like to dive into just real quickly here, and this may seem really elementary, but I'm going to ask this question anyway because I think it's important to define it early. How do you define mindset?
Yeah, well, there's sort of a surface definition of it, which is a conditioned set of beliefs that drive behavior. So that's kind of like, kind of the popular definition of mindset, a conditioned set of beliefs that drive behavior. But of course, I'm not satisfied with that.
Sure.
I always like to go a little bit deeper. And so I tried to figure out, and it actually took me about 6 years to figure out, but I actually came up with an equation, like a physics equation that that has different elements to it that make up or define what a mindset is. Because if I'm going to help somebody change their mindset or evolve their mindset, I kind of have to know what element to evolve. So it's like this: you have an experience, you have thoughts and feelings about. So most of our mindset come from previous experiences. So you have an experience that you have thoughts and feelings about. When you're a little bit older, you might say to yourself, well, I, kind of paid the stupid tax with that, or somehow I participated or initiated that experience. But sometimes, especially when we're younger, not always, but especially when we're younger, they happen to us. So we don't have a lot of control over it. So we have thoughts and feelings about an experience that we had. And then if you have that experience and the thoughts and feelings in the brackets, then you have your response to it. So if you're younger, you may not have chosen how you responded to things, but as you get older, you do have more of an opportunity to know how you want to respond to things. And if you put all of that together, the experience, the thoughts and the feelings and your response, you actually form a belief about yourself. And then what happens after that is once you believe something about yourself, whether you're cognizant of it or not, you will often create habits and rhythms that are associated with the belief that you have. And if you put all of that together, you come up with a mindset, but it doesn't end there. So a mindset, and this is what I learned from Andy McKay from the Seattle Mariners, a mindset must result in new and improved behaviors. So it's not just one thing to change your mindset or evolve your mindset. It's really important that it results in behaviors that put you in a better position to succeed. So you put all that together and you end with behaviors that are advantageous to your success. Well, new and improved behaviors are kind of like new experiences that you could have new and improved thoughts and feelings about, new and improved responses to, new and improved beliefs about yourself with new and improved habits and a new and improved mindset. And this cycle is how you actually build a mindset.
I love that. And I was going to say, you started to draw the circle there on the screen. It's sort of this big circle. So here's what I'm taking from that. And I'm going to break this down, like you were saying, the equation. And just so that I know that I'm hearing it correctly, sort of your experience equals your thoughts and feelings plus your response, which develops, you said belief. I don't know if I would say greater than or equal to the habits that are produced. I trying to create this to a math equation, maybe not the best thing on a leadership show. One of the things then that you closed with was your mindset has to result in new and improved behaviors. But can't somebody have a poor mindset?
Yeah, they certainly can. And you can probably succeed here and there more
Okay.
sporadically. But if you want to succeed at something consistently, you're probably going to have to be quite intentional about your mindset. So, for example, your brain is like a computer. And when you wake up in the morning, you get to choose the programs that you boot up your computer with. So, if you're choosing optimal programs to boot your computer up instead of viruses or instead of things that slow you down, like opening up your mail first thing in the morning or checking social media first thing in the morning. Those are all things that'll slow down your RAM and your computer. And if you just are intentional about the programs that that load up in every morning, well, you can actually set yourself up for a very successful day if you are intentional about it.
Can we dive into that for a minute? I would love if you would share it, because I think that's an important part. And I always like to, hopefully steer down a path that people that are watching or listening to the show with some tactical, like tangible things that they can take with them. They say, hey, I tuned into the show. What am I going to be able to take with me? So like for yourself, or if you're coaching somebody else, what is the optimal way that you would now? And I know there's probably a myriad of answers to this, so I'll preface it with that. But using you as the example, what's the optimal way then for you to start your day, off strong, loading in the proper programs, and therefore leading to that elite mindset that you can govern throughout your day?
Well, for me, there's things that are peripheral and there are things that are fundamental. And I think the most fundamental thing that anyone could ever do is win each day. So what I mean by that, I mean, maybe people have heard, carpe diem, or they've heard, like a win the day before, but it's very specific for me. So what that looks like is having an internal locus of control. So I get to decide the success of my day. What are the metrics by which I would measure the success of my day? And if I get to choose them, then my internal locus of control is actually quite stable. If I have an external locus of control, which is not the ideal scenario, the external locus of control is determined by the things that happen to you. So think of like arrows happening to you. And
Sure.
so you live each day quite white knuckled if you want to live your day or life that way. But if you have an internal locus of control and you get to decide the metrics, then you get to be the one who figures out whether you're having a successful day or not. So what that looks like for me is, and I call it WTD or win the day, is either having 5 or 7 things that you do every day that put you in the best position to succeed. Because one of the mantras of what I teach is you can never control an outcome, but you can always put yourself in the best position to succeed. And it's one of the rules that I live my life by. It's so valuable. So the things I can't control, I can't control. But if I could have influenced it in some way or in some better way, then that's on me. And I need to take responsibility for that. So you can never control an outcome, but you can always put yourself in the best position to succeed. So if I was to put myself in the best position to succeed on a daily basis, there are 5 or 7, and in my case, 7 things that I would do to put myself in the best position to succeed. So those things for me are: number 1, at least sleep 7 hours. Number 2, to eat well. Number 3, to move for at least 30 minutes or an hour a day. Number 4 is to have something called blue sky time, where I'm a visionary. So I'm always thinking about what's next or who can I connect with. And, I get to dream a little bit. So I call that my blue sky time. Number 5 is I get to have a quiet time, and where it's very personal for me. So as a believer in Christ, I have a quiet time where I can just meditate, read my Bible, pray, whatever it is.
Sure.
Number 6 is I have a personal philosophy that I quote every day. So that's one of my other exercises that I can teach. So I quote my personal philosophy every day to anchor me to me, because oftentimes there's so many things that are going on in the world that we get de-anchored from ourselves. And so it's just my way of coupling myself to my personal philosophy and who I am. So that's identity based. And then finally, I make 3 declarations every day. So if I do 4 out of the 7, I win the day. If I do 3 out of the 7 or less, I lose the day. So for me, I put a big W or an L on a calendar in my closet. And every day I got to tell the truth. And I either have an L or a W. The power of this is that if you put together 2 wins in a row, that's pretty good. If you put together 3 wins in a row, That's really, really good. If you do 4 or more, now you have a good winning streak. If you do 5, you have real momentum. And how much easier is life when you have momentum? So you're constantly heading in the right direction. So I can't control outcomes, but I can put myself in the best position to succeed. And those are fundamental things that are identity based. So I call it identity based performance that put me in the best position to succeed.
That is absolutely wonderful. I always sit over here, and part of the reason I gotta, being transparent with the audience, part of the reason I share the screen and make sure that and put my guests on the screen like that is so I can sit and take it all in and take the notes. And Gary beforehand was like, "Oh, I've been on some 2-hour shows. We've done this. We were talking about optimal time, and it's like now that you're saying all this, I don't know how it couldn't be a 2-hour show. We could do another one. No, it's really phenomenal. And I think there's a few things I always encourage people to listen or watch podcasts with a pen or pencil in your hand, because there's something about paper and actually writing this stuff down, right? It helps it commit it to memory. And so as you're talking about developing your mindset and measuring that personal success, and as you measure success, going back through and continuing to build and improve on it. So I asked the question, and I put Gary on the spot, and knowingly, we never really have much conversation before these shows, and said, okay, well, what are some things that you do? And so I'm just going to recap real quick for people. I love the fact that you said, okay, I've got this mantra, win the day, and I can never control the outcome, but I can put myself in the best position to succeed. And those are some key points I would recommend to people. Write that down. You were saying, hey, win the day in 5 to 7 things. Something that I want people to hear, and this is what I'm taking away from this. If I ever step on my own toes, and Gary, if I'm off, you jump right in and correct me. It won't hurt my feelings. But one of the things that I absolutely love is you're like, okay, it's 5 to 7 things. What I'm hearing is that's not going to be the same 5 to 7 things for everybody. But whatever the 5 to 7 things are for you, one of the things that matters is consistency. It's right.
In order for anyone to be successful at anything, you have to be consistent. It is a requirement. It is an ingredient for success. So what are you most likely to be consistent at? Well, it's being you. So in other words, I've had people say that, one of their 5 or 7 things are singing in the morning. Well, it's not one of my 5 or 7 things, but for them, it just puts them in a completely different mindset. And so it's just being in touch with your identity, and you're uniquely wired. We all are uniquely wired. And so you're absolutely right. It is really dependent on the personality and the identity of the person. That's why I call it identity-based performance.
Well, and then I think it's important that as people are hearing this, like, do take the time, and I would encourage everybody, while you have the pen in your hand right after the podcast, if this is something, it's one thing to say, oh, hey, that sounds great. Okay, I listen to Gary talk about this. I listen to Mike talk about, oh man, that sounds great. Yeah, I'm going to do it. But what's that level of commitment? Take the time to write down those things, because I love the fact that, I put Gary a little bit on the spot here, and he says, oh, here's my 7. Right? No hesitation. Just says, hey, let me line this out for you. I get 7 hours of sleep. I eat well. Like, I would fail at those 2 right out the gate. Just to be, just being honest. I am very much a night owl. If I get 7 hours of sleep, that's a lot.
You're probably sick. Like if anybody gets 7 or more, like often a lot of people I talk to say, man, if I get 7 or 8 hours sleep, I'm probably sick,
Yeah.
Because we get so much.
Those things you got to look at, but and all these are good for everybody, like eating well, moving 30 or more minutes, like get up off your tail. And that's something that took a long time. It took me a long time to get that, the moving 30 or more minutes, because and this may sound totally silly. I was, you and I were talking beforehand. I was a hockey player for 20 plus years. I was a referee. I was a coach. I was on skates all the time. Yeah. That's just part of life. And you don't realize that something like that falls into your moving 30 minutes. Well, when I changed careers, I changed businesses. I realized, after putting on quite a bit of weight over the first year or two, like, I have to be really deliberate with this too. It's not just being consistent, it's being deliberate with how am I going to assign these things that are important. Here's this is one of my buddies, Leadership with Mike. You guys have the same haircut. He says, I have to get 8 hours of sleep or I'm dead. And knowing Mike, that's very true. So I love the fact that you're saying, okay, hey, here's this breakdown. Here's these 7 things. Here's the other thing, because for me, how do you determine, and I may not word this well, Gary, but how do I determine what's the win? Because for me, I'm a very like type A, go personality, using your, elite mindset nation.com reference, right? In my mind, I have an elite mindset. Like, I'm going to go after this thing. I'm going to do it. If I'm going to have 7 things is a win, 6 is a fail. That's how I'm going to assign it. So how do I get to that point of saying, okay, here's these 5 or 6 or 7? Am I just determining what the win is? And should I make those things? Because to me, like, you're probably in a rhythm, and I know I'm asking multiple questions, but you're in a rhythm. You're probably hitting 6 or 7 of those every day, just based
Yeah.
on the few minutes you and I have spent. And you
Yeah,
said, hey, if you get,
probably before 8 a.m. I'm a
yeah,
3:45 to 4 a.m. kind of guy. Sometimes I sleep into 4:30, but typically that's my rhythm. And a
sure,
lot of people don't like the word habits. I really enjoy the word rhythms because these are just rhythms that I have in my life. But you can
sure.
also call them wins. These are the wins of my life. And I think the reason why this is so important, especially to track them, is because confidence is only built 2 ways. There's a lot of people talking about confidence in my
Mm-hmm.
industry. I mean, everyone's got an opinion about confidence. I think there are only 2 ways to build confidence, and there aren't anymore. Everything else is sort of pop psychology, but it's not actual psychology. So, number one is you have to prove things to yourself. Okay. You have
Mm.
to prove it. You have to prove it, or else you don't have evidence. So the first one is you have to prove things to yourself. The second one is preparation. So if you didn't prepare for this podcast, or you were going to be on stage and you didn't prepare, you would most likely be less confident. And how much
Absolutely.
easier is life when you're a confident person? So those W's or those L's, they really determine how much confidence that you have. And so the idea is to have a winning streak long enough that you're a perpetually confident person. That if I put my mind to something, I can probably do it. And that is not positive psychology. That is what I call optimism. So I'm not a big believer in positivity. Um, it's a feeling that's fleeting. It can be dangerous. It can be dishonest. It cannot tell the truth. But
Mm.
optimism always requires a reason for you to be optimistic. So if you said, "Hey Gary, I'm going to jump out of a plane tomorrow," I'm going to be like, "Well, what reasons have you given yourself to be optimistic that you can do this?" And if you can't give me any, Mike, you shouldn't jump out of that plane.
I
But
will
if you,
not be doing that tomorrow.
yeah, but if you say, "Hey, Gary, I've taken classes. I've sort of, I've been on somebody else's back in training, and I kind of did a mock, then yeah, you probably have a reason to be optimistic." So I'm not a big believer in positivity. You've heard of toxic positivity. I've actually seen positivity be extremely dangerous. In fact,
How so?
there's 2 examples. One of them is a client of mine who went down a ski hill here in Washington, just outside of Seattle. And a lot of his friends were being super positive, and he was trying to psych himself up and being super positive. He went down the hill and he broke his leg. So
Mm.
it actually can be dangerous. And you can say, well, maybe there was some peer pressure, and yeah, that's true. That's true. But I know another circumstance of a client of mine, an executive in Tacoma, Washington, whose next door neighbor. So he has a son, a 10-year-old. He had a neighbor who has a 10-year-old, and they went down Mount Hood just outside of Portland, Oregon, and that little child lost his life. Same circumstance, gave into the peer pressure. Everybody was being super positive. He was trying to think positive, and he lost his life. So you
Mm.
can be dishonest with yourself, and you can tell yourself that you can do something that you actually can't. And so positivity is actually it can be dangerous. You can lie to yourself, and it's not a very, what I would call, a clean fuel. But optimism is a far better way of thinking, because you always have to have a reason to be optimistic. And so if you keep giving yourself reasons to be optimistic, then I think that's a really great place to be. And so what this looks like on a practical level, to sort of continue your original thought, was what sort of defines success. Well, for
Yeah.
me, it's actually quite different than it is for a lot of people. But for me, it's not positional, it's directional. It's not
Okay.
positional, it's directional. So a lot of times when people achieve something, they take their foot off the gas pedal. In fact, I think it was Bane in one of the Batman series of movies who told Batman, your victory will be your defeat, because you're going to take your foot off the gas pedal and you think you've arrived. So it's not positional. It's not attaining something or achieving, a title or something like that. It's actually directional. And the way that this has played out in my life is, this is just like a fun little thing, but
Sure.
in fact, it's just, it's neither here nor there. However, I've always wanted to bench press my weight, which is about 200 pounds. And ever since I was in high school, I was never a bench presser, but I thought about 8 months ago, I thought, for the first time, I'm going to try and bench press. So I started at 135. I'm strong in other areas, but bench press was not my thing. And so what I would do is there would be little weights about this big.
Yeah.
And they were 2.5 pounds. So I put 2.5 pounds on one side, 2.5 pounds on the other side. And I hit my goal about 3 months ago of 200 pounds.
Congratulations.
So thank you. So it was just incremental. And then then I traveled a bunch, because that's what I do for a living, is speak on stages and travel. And then I lost a lot of my strength. And so for the last, 6 weeks or 8 weeks, I've been trying to get back into, this 200-pound thing. And I started again at 165. And then I had to work my way up to 200 again. So this actually yesterday morning, I just hit 195. So I'm 5 pounds off, but here we go again. And there actually is no achievement. It's just, let's see how far I can take this. And I think when you are directional, here's the most amazing thought is, am I heading in the right direction in this area of my life? It's not about achievement. It's not about hitting a milestone or even a goal sometimes. It's, am I heading in the right direction? Because if you feel like you're heading in the right direction in your marriage or your relationship with your kids or your job or whatever it is, if you feel like you're heading in the right direction, it's a literal mindset shift. It's a game changer. If you say to yourself, I might not be where I want to be, but I'm heading in the right direction. And as long as you keep thinking like that and enjoying the mystery of how far you can go, that's I think a far better mindset to have than a positional mindset.
I love that. And just from that last little piece of the conversation where you're talking about building confidence and am I headed the right direction? Growth is directional, not positional. And there's a couple things that stand out to me in that, series here as we're talking. I love the fact that you shared, and just going back here for a second, that confidence is proving things to yourself. Fast forward, you're talking about the bench press, right? Every piece of confidence, everything that we do is built 2.5 pounds at a time. We have this, especially, and again, using myself as an example, it's like all or nothing, right? Now I got to throw one of them 45s on and do it. And it doesn't always work. Right. And so the reality is we prove that to ourselves, but it's not just at once, it's over time. It's those 2.5 pound plates, then a 5 pound plate, then a 10 pound plate, and so on and so forth. So I love that piece of it. And then the preparation, just making sure, building that confidence, making sure that you're prepared, whether it's for a podcast, whether it's, could be something simple like I'm preparing to drive to work and getting mentally prepared for the day. Right. I think those are just such powerful statements. And then this last piece of, am I headed in the right direction? And I want to ask you, because it's very easy. And I've been there in my career. I know you've been there probably in your career. Those of you listening, you've been there in your career, that you go, man, if I could just get to the top of the mountain, if I could just get the promotion, if I could just get the manager title, if I could just get this acknowledgement or that certificate or that certification. And then you get there and you go, is this all there is? And the fact that you said it's directional, and correct me if I'm off on this, directional does not always mean up. When you're saying, hey, am I headed in the right direction? It may start out meaning, hey, I've got to head up and I've got to do this thing and I got to, plant my flag at the top of the mountain. But then sometimes you get to the top of the mountain and you look across and you go, oh man, now I can see this whole other place over there that I need to head to. So my direction may be across, but to get there, I got to go down a little bit. and travel through a valley and then head back up. So that's one of the things that I'm hearing. I know you didn't say that specifically, but I pick up on some of these things that it's like, okay, am I headed in the right direction for that personal growth piece, for that relational growth piece, for that business growth piece? Would you agree with that?
Yeah, there's an analogy that I think is really powerful, and that is that, a lot of life feels like you're climbing up a mountain,
Mm-hmm.
and you sort of hit some type of plateau, and you think to yourself, man, like that was a tough hike. Like that was really tough. And you get to this plateau and you look out over the horizon and you see how beautiful it is. You see how wonderful the journey was, and you see so much more because of that you're just at an elevated place. But then you turn around and you look and you're like, there's another cliff ahead of you. Like, there's
Yes.
another climb, and it's even more difficult and more challenging than the previous one. But you've acquired some skill and some courage in that last one, but it inspires you to climb the next one. And so you think, wow, man, that's really scary. I don't know if I can do that. But you prove to yourself that you can climb the first time. So then you take this new cliff and you get to a peak, and it's kind of scary along the way. And you have some pretty hairy spots that you're in some really difficult positions, but you make your way through, and then you get to the top and you look over the horizon and you get to see how much more beautiful the horizon is and how much more beautiful the view is. But then you turn around and you have another cliff to climb. I think a lot of life is like that, but we
Mm-hmm.
accumulate these experiences to give us confidence to be able to keep going and keep achieving things and helping us discover what we're made out of. And so I think this idea of enjoying the mystery of seeing how far you can go is just a really wonderful way to experience life. For example, um, if I had an opportunity to work a little bit with the New England Patriots, and one of the ways that I got a hold of Bill Belichick was I was trying to find his email address to send him a message, and his email address was the janitor at thepatriots.com,
That
and
is
which is
awesome.
which is of course hilariously him, right?
Sure.
So anyway, just having him respond to my emails and talking things through is just so much fun. And that's why I have the blue sky time in my day every day, because I want to be able to who are my dream clients, who are my dream teams that I want to work with, and then just allow myself to dream. Like, do I want to have a global impact? And the answer is yes, I do want to have a global impact. And then all of a sudden, I get an opportunity, a global website that has over 250 million clicks a year contacts me and says, "We'd love to put your stuff on our website." So 48 different languages, and you have to be able to. There's two kinds of seeing. One of them is with your eyes, another one is with your mind. Everything happens twice in life. First in your mind and then in real life. But even before that, you see things with your eyes, but you have to see things with your mind. And one of the reasons why people don't accomplish a lot of things is because they can't see themselves doing it. So
Mm.
you have to see yourself, not see
That's a
yourself.
gut punch.
You have to see yourself doing it so that you actually can put it into play.
Well, and one of the things, we'll shift gears in a second here. I'm going to hold on to that thought because I think that's very powerful with the two kinds of seeing. I'm going to promote you again for just a second. Again, if somebody's just now tuning in, maybe you've watched for a little bit. I've had this on the screen a few times, but definitely check out Gary's website at elitemindsetnation.com. That's all one word, no spaces, elitemindsetnation.com. Also, if you're wanting to, connect with Gary to bring the best of sports mental performance, because there's so many analogies moving into business, you can check out onedaylevate.com. That's ONEDAY elevate.com. Again, no spaces, but spell out the word one. It's not the number one. It's spelled out there. And so one thing that I want to, because we were talking a little bit beforehand about, sports we liked and those sorts of things. And I have a son that works for me now. He was briefly at the Olympic Training Center for gymnastics. We're talking about my daughter's in gymnastics. You've been in sports and have kids in sports and so forth. One of the things when you're saying, hey, you got to be able to see this first in your mind and second with your eyes. One of the things that I find so amazing about elite level athletes specifically, if you pay close attention, and you'll probably appreciate this, so often, whether it's football, NFL, baseball, gymnastics, sports, Olympians, right? You'll see this often on the Olympics, where an Olympian will step up to compete, and prior to competing, or while they're watching them, hey, here's this Olympic athlete, they're getting ready to compete, and the cameras will flash to them, and often they're sitting there with their eyes closed, sort of meditating, visualizing, seeing the outcome that they want first in their mind. And it's not woo-woo stuff, right? It's actually walking through what's the routine, how am I going to perform, how am I going to accomplish this, seeing it first in their mind's eye before they go to perform that. So how would you, and you're nodding and agreeing, how do you start to apply that then, like on the one day elevate stuff that you do? How do you apply that sort of discipline, moving it into business?
Yeah, it's really interesting. One of the very first things, in fact, the very first session that I do whenever I do a one day elevate is, I'll have a crowd, and it could be either, a few dozen, or it could be hundreds, or a couple thousand, or whatever. I'll just say, hey, what does it take to be an elite athlete, do you think? Like, if you were just to guess, and, there's 30 or 40 answers. There's resilience, there's self-talk, there's emotional regulation, there's grit, there's humility, being coachable. I mean, there's all these things.
Sure.
So we go down this list, and we try to exhaust it. So it does take about 10 or 15 minutes, because what'll happen is people will think that's enough. And I'm like, no, there's more than that, right? Like, this is like, it takes hard work. It takes practice. It takes all these, it takes confidence. It takes all these things. Well, then I stop, and then I'll say, just out of curiosity, what do you think it takes to be successful at your business? And they look at the list on the screen, and they kind of go, just all that stuff. And so it's not actually that different. Like, if you were going to be successful, like elite at what you do, let's say, and you have multiple businesses, but what does it take for you to be successful at the businesses that you have? Would it take resilience? Would it take emotional regulation? Would it take healthy self-talk? It would take all of those things and more. So we're not actually that different than professional athletes. And one of the benefits of being a professional athlete is that you're performing only 1 to 3 or 4 times a week at the most. So, or even less than that. So you work your way up to one event, and then you perform. But if you're a business person, you are performing almost every day. You are really working every week, every month. You are not getting the replenishment that you need, but you are really putting out, right? You're really working hard. So I don't think there's that much difference between the sports world and the business world, and what it takes to be really good at what you do. And so I think the crossover is actually pretty amazing. And a lot of the people, in fact, I was just talking to a guy who owns the McLaren dealership here in Seattle. Okay. And we were talking about sales, and we were talking about, his employees. And this was last week at a Chamber of Commerce event in our area. And I said, so how important is mindset in the car industry? And he looked at me and rolled his eyes, and he goes, oh man, it's like 70 or 80% of what we do is mindset. And so he said, hey, give me your number. Let's do a one day elevate for my dealership. And so we're going to do that. But I think it's pretty crucial to understand that there's not that much different between athletes and high performers in business.
Absolutely. Well, you asked me that right before we went live. You say, hey, how important is, you were setting me up. How important is
not
mindset?
Intentionally, but
No, not at all. But it's like, hey, how important is mindset? And I think depending on who you ask, like you're saying 70, 80%. And I would say mindset is the first. Yeah. No, I hear you loud and clear. That, like, mindset is the first thing. Is it the only thing? No, you have to have skill set too, right? You have to have those pieces. You got to have processes, right? Nobody's up there saying, hey, what does it take to be elite? Man, you really got to know Excel spreadsheets, Gary. Yeah. You got to, right? This is important. But in business, that is something, you need somebody that needs to be able to handle those sorts of things. So if you were to distill it down, kind of as we're coming down the pipeline here, and I've really enjoyed this conversation. Thank you so much for making the time to sit and chat with me today. If you were to distill it down, because one of the things on your sheet and the info that came over was, hey, there's 3 traits of elite performers. What would you distill that down to like, what are 3 things cross business or sports or, relationally in the church, right? I mean, in wherever, whatever vertical of business or life you might be operating in, what are three traits that all elite performers would you say they have in common?
Yeah, that's such a great question. I don't know if I've been asked that one recently. Well, I would take my cue from the Seattle Mariners, and again, Andy McKay. He said that the very first thing they teach and the most important thing they teach from day one of training camp.
Write these down.
Yeah. Number one is belief. Do you believe that if you put in the work, that you can be as successful as you want to be? So every player has a different goal, whether it's to, make the team, be an all-star, get their second contract, get their third contract, or whatever it is, win a World Series. Like, everybody's different. All those players are different.
Sure.
And the Mariners have a file on every single player in their system, just not on the major league team, in their system, because they want to know what this person's motivation is. So self-belief, if you don't have that, you're already done. You're already done. And a really great way to describe it is I have a cup here that I'm holding, and
Okay.
imagine this contains your belief, right? The top would be a 10, the bottom would be a 0. That's right.
Okay.
And if your self-belief to perform at a high level in a particular industry is like a 7, you will always lead at a 7, no matter what gets poured into you. So you're giving a training as a leader or as a supervisor or a manager or a business owner. If you feel like you're constantly pouring into somebody and they're not quite getting it, it's most likely because their level of self-belief is like a 5. So they are leaking at the level of their self-belief. So when you put on those batting gloves or you're at work, you better figure out what your level of self-belief is, because you are the CBO of your life. You're the chief belief officer. And if you're not believing, nobody's believing. So a lot of people use this idea of like, you got to believe as sort of like an ethereal, mystical, rah. It's not rah.
Right.
If you don't believe that you can do it, then you're not going to do it. So you said earlier, like, whether you believe you can or you can't, you're right. Right.
Yep.
And so that's number one. If I put in the work, am I capable of doing what I want to do? So that would be number one. Number two, I don't think you can be successful at anything without a level of confidence. So my win the day is a subtle and maybe even side door way of increasing your self-confidence. Because in order for you to be successful, confidence is just an ingredient. You can never get away with it. So it's your job to increase your self-belief and increase your confidence. And then the third one is probably what I think the holy grail of all mental performance is. And I've never been proven wrong.
Okay.
It is what it is, whether people can see it or not. It's self-leadership. It is not motivation. Your ability to lead yourself, even when you don't feel like it, is the holy grail. In other words, you will run laps around people who don't feel like running, and yet you're out there doing it. And you're putting in the time. And like you said earlier, which I really love, it's not always vertical. It's not always achievement. It's not always vertical. But sometimes just showing up at the gym is the win when you're feeling under the weather, or when you're not at your best, or you don't really feel like it. It is the holy grail of all performance. And so I teach something called the leadership pyramid. That first level is self-leadership. It is the foundation of the entire structure. Next level is couple leadership, which is just another person. It's not a romantic thing. It's just another person. So coaching, mentoring, advising, that kind of thing. You're showing someone else how to do something, almost like a protege. The third level is group leadership. So self-leadership, couple leadership, group leadership. So if you do self-leadership well and you do couple leadership well, then you can lead a group. Why shouldn't you lead a group if you've never done couple leadership? Because one of the primary responsibilities of a group leader is to create the next leader, right? Mm-hmm. Or to train someone so that they can go do it themselves in another group, so you can multiply and be more effective. The fourth level is area or department leadership. And it's kind of like a group of groups, isn't it? Like if you're a defensive coordinator, you have your DBs, your linemen, you have your linebackers. So you're the defensive captain. You're leading in an area or department, right? You're leading that side of the ball. And then finally, you have organizational leadership. And the common theme through all of this is the entire structure can fall or show stress fractures because of the self-leadership of the primary leader.
Mm.
And if the self-leadership of the primary leader is weak or it's showing stress fractures, maybe they're not honest, maybe they exaggerate, maybe they don't have character, maybe they don't have integrity, everyone knows it, it'll send stress fractures down the entire thing. So you never stop self-leading, you never stop learning, you never stop being humble, you never stop growing. And it's all because of your own self-leadership. And if you show good self-leadership as a primary leader, you give every level of the organization a chance to succeed and be solid.
That's wonderful. Absolutely wonderful, Gary. I'm going to go back here for just 1 second because I asked the question, and you always provide so much more. It's really good, man. I've really enjoyed this conversation. Because I said, hey, what are 3 traits? What are the most important things of elite performers? And I know you expanded on these, but if people didn't write them down, right? Be the CBO, the chief belief officer, right? So have belief in yourself. 2, have confidence and build confidence and continue building confidence. 3, self-leadership. And then you broke out the leadership pyramid, which I'll make sure and include in the description and the notes. Super powerful. And I think that's one that is, you're right. Like you can turn it on its head, right? And again, correct me if I'm wrong. Like I could say self-leadership's number 1 because you got to self-lead to develop belief, to develop confidence, or you got to, self-leadership could be number 1. Those are sort of interchangeable, interlocking.
Yeah.
Like, I can adjust where those go, but those 3 are all super powerful if you want to have an elite mindset in business and in life, right? So, couple of real quick announcements. We're coming down the tail end. We're already at 45 minutes. Time's flown by, man. So a few things for those of you out there in podcast land. I'm going to remind you one more time. You can connect with Gary on LinkedIn. It's linkedin.com/n/GaryChupik. So no spaces there. You can also connect at elitemindsetnation.com. I won't spell that out again. I've spelled it out a few times. I'll have that in the notes as well. And then certainly if you want to check out Gary's website, One Day Elevate. So you want to connect with him for those, moving sports mental performance into business. That's a 1 day sort of event, correct? Mm-hmm. Hence the name One Day Elevate. So it's 1 day and he's going to lift you up. So make sure and connect with him on any of those platforms. I'll have links to Gary's other socials and other items here in the podcast description. Gary, any final thoughts that you have that you want to take us out with today?
No, I just appreciate you and appreciate your podcast and how you're investing in the people around you, people that you don't even know. And so thank you for doing what you do, Mike. And you're obviously very, very good at it. So thanks for having me on the show. And, my hope is that we just pour a small drop into each other's lives. And that way nobody's cup is empty. And so I appreciate you just pouring a drip into everybody's cup. So I appreciate that.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Gary. If you would hang out for just a minute, I'm going to close this out. Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, that is going to bring us to a close for another outstanding episode of the Leadership Toolkit. What a fun conversation, and just such a wealth of knowledge and just great information that was discussed. I got 2 pages worth of notes. I'm just looking over here at it going, holy cow, I got to fit all this into a description. I'll share a blog on this on Friday. I'll share this throughout the week on my socials and so forth. I'll share it with Gary and his team. So make sure you connect and follow him, connect on his websites. Thank you everybody for taking the time to tune in and join me this Wednesday afternoon. Most importantly, there's actually a couple of asks that I have for you. 1, do me a favor, please subscribe to the show. Throw some thumbs up on it, throw some likes, certainly share it on your social media if you've gained value out of listening to this podcast. But most importantly, rather than, promoting it for promotion's sake, if you know somebody that would really get something out of listening to this show, if you know somebody that's right there on the cusp, that they're like, man, they need to hear this definition of mindset because it would help them grow. They need to hear what these 3 pieces are that Gary covered at the end. Any of these things that we talked about, winning each day, come up with the consistency to do the same things each day. Share this with somebody that needs to hear the message. That's the most important thing. Yes, share it on your social media, share it on all those places. It'd be awesome. But each of you has somebody in your life that you can connect with and pour into, and you say, hey, you got to hear this show. And maybe it's you. Maybe you already heard it. If so, go back and listen to it again. So thank you, everybody, for taking the time to tune in and join me today on the Leadership Toolkit. Until we speak next, stay great. We'll see you next Wednesday.